The Silver Dragon Queen retaliated against me by showing me the video of our previous sports together. I was forced to recall what I had said to her before, and was subjected to retaliatory torture by her. After intense physical activity with the Silver Dragon Queen, the messenger dragon sent a letter informing us that Noah had fought with other classmates. The vice principal brought us and classmates' parents to the office and explained the situation at that time. After the vice principal finished speaking, Noah suddenly wanted to add other content. Leon's hands and feet were handcuffed by Roswitha, and his eyes were covered with a pair of stockings. He was thrown onto the bed by Roswitha and dared not move freely. Although he was feeling a bit nervous at this moment, he still decided not to give in to Roswitha's interrogation of him. He spoke loudly to her. "She-Dragon, let me tell you, I have received professional anti-interrogation training and will never submit to you." Upon hearing his words, Roswitha chuckled inwardly. She sat in front of him and reached out to touch the crystal ball placed on the tray. She said to him with a smile on her face, Is that so?" After Roswitha touched the crystal ball a few times, it suddenly emitted a blue light. Then, the glow converged into a screen. The screen suddenly started playing the last time. Leon was controlled by Roswitha's improved blood curse and kept saying prayers to her. "Roswitha, I want to kiss you. Please, give me." Leon suddenly became nervous. Although he was blindfolded by socks and couldn't see the scene, when he heard the familiar sound, his eyes slightly widened and his expression gradually became a bit scared. He stuttered, This is..." Roswitha touched the crystal ball and turned her head to look at Leon. She knew that he would be very anxious when he heard this voice at this moment. She put on a mocking expression and said to him, "Huh? So who is the person begging me like this?" At this moment, the crystal ball continued to play the scene of Leon begging Roswitha. On the screen, he said another sentence to her. "Ah, Roswitha." Leon heard his voice coming out of the crystal ball again. He felt his head smoking and his body trembling uncontrollably. He became increasingly nervous, and his face instantly took on a large blush. He opened his mouth, but for a moment, he couldn't think of any words to refute Roswitha. That. Roswitha picked up the crystal ball from the tray and slowly brought it closer to Leon. Leon gradually became able to hear the sound inside the crystal ball clearly. However, he still didn't want to admit that the voice in the crystal ball was his own. He turned his head to the side, pointed with his finger to the place where the sound was coming from, and said firmly to Roswitha, "That can't be me. It's just that the sound is very similar." Roswitha knew that Leon was still trying to argue, and didn't want to admit what he had said to her. She secretly mocked him in her heart. She held the crystal ball in front of Leon, and untied the stockings tied around his eyes. She said to him with a mocking tone, "Oh, is that so? Shall I give you a closer look?" Leon felt the stocking being removed from his eyes, and his vision gradually cleared. However, when he saw the crystal ball before him, he was stunned. The crystal ball displayed images of him, and he could distinctly hear his own voice. "Roswitha, I want to kiss you, hug you, and be one with you." The sound inside the crystal ball kept drifting into Leon's ears. This gave Leon goosebumps all over his body, as if he had been electrocuted and felt very numb. He closed his eyes, and his expression became very painful. He couldn't stand the words he said to Roswitha at that time. Leon had no choice but to surrender to Roswitha. He knelt on the bed in shame, lowered his head, clasped his hands together, hoping that she wouldn't continue playing his video anymore. He shouted loudly, "No need! I remember everything." Roswitha wrapped one hand around her body and held a crystal ball with the other hand. She looked down at Leon's wretched condition, feeling quite satisfied with how quickly he had succumbed to her. She showed a victorious smile. She picked up the whip placed on the tray and said to Leon, "It's good that you remember. So now, you repeat what you just said a few more times." Roswitha held a whip in one hand and pinched the tip of the whip with the other, smiling as she looked at Leon. She has now begun to plan how to torture Leon as revenge for the torture he inflicted on her a few days ago. If you can't remember clearly, the teacher can review for you. She lifted Leon's chin with a whip, forcing him to look up at her. Faced with compromising evidence in Roswitha's possession, Leon wore a troubled expression, not daring to struggle or make excuses recklessly. He wanted to say something, but found himself unable to say anything. He had no choice but to follow the instructions of Roswitha. Under the illumination of the desk lamp, the shadows of Leon and Roswitha were projected onto the cabinet. Roswitha swung the whip in her hand and struck Leon's body with force. Leon knelt on the bed, struggling to endure the pain caused by the whip beating. After a while, Roswitha slowly approached him while beating his body. The shadows of two bodies overlapped. The warm-colored desk lamp silently illuminated Roswitha's room. It cannot speak, just silently watching their interaction, bringing them some light. It knew they had spent another unforgettable night. At this moment, the round moon has risen, bringing a bright moonlight to the starry sky. The moonlight happened to shine into Roswitha's room. At this moment, Leon and Roswitha had just experienced intense physical activity. Under the illumination of the moonlight, the marks on Leon's body from being whipped could be seen very clearly. He lay in bed, feeling as if his body had been hollowed out. He turned his head and silently shed tears for himself. At this moment, a red messenger dragon flew in from outside the window. Roswitha heard some movement by the window and immediately got out of bed and walked to the window. Messenger Dragon stood by the window and brought her a letter. After reading the contents of the letter, her expression suddenly became somewhat strange. Noticing the movements of Roswitha, Leon turned his head and noticed the messenger dragon by the window. Now that it was late in the day, something must have happened for the messenger dragon to send a letter at this time. Seeing the change in Roswitha's expression, Leon looked at her wearily and asked, "This is a letter from the academy, right? Sending the messenger dragon so late. Did something happen?" Roswitha put down the letter in her hand. She turned her head and looked at Leon with a serious expression, telling him the contents of the letter. "The academy asked us to go to the school tomorrow. Noah got into a fight with someone." Upon hearing the news, Leon was so scared that he sat up from the bed. He looked over at Roswitha with a shocked expression, somewhat disbelieving the news. Eh? The time gradually came from evening to morning. The starry night sky and the moon in the sky gradually transformed into an orange-red sky and sun.
Hey! Have you heard about it? Lolo Bun has uploaded a new comic. I have already shared a new comic. The name of this comic is The Blonde-Haired Villain in Girl Overlord novel, also longs for happiness. I have already shared the relevant content of this comic in this video. You can click on this video to learn about the comic story and character information. If you are interested, you can subscribe to my channel and wait for the sharing of new comic.